Good evening, everybody. Wearing a white shirt this time, my favorite Monty Python show, The Ministry of Silly Walks. Look it up, Monty Python. It's funny. Okay. Well, I'd like to introduce you and welcome you to TE 825 version this summer, 2019. And as you know, in the area of ESL, English learners, their families, communities, immigrant rights, we are living in the tough times. I was going to say the golden age of chaos. That might be more accurate. But you as an English language teacher or associated or planning to be a teacher or work in that area or have a school with EL students in it or migrant students, which by the way aren't the same thing. A little detail, migrants simply mean someone that moves to an area to work in the area of agricultural products, fishing, or lumber production. So migrants might be people that are moving to Canada, are moving to Maine, and they're French-speaking Canadians who have legally or whatever crossed the border and are interested in helping with forest and lumber production. So the EL people, ESL types you would find up there would be French speakers. It's the only state, I think, where the English learners are majority French speakers. And the French teacher could help. No, they wouldn't, but okay, well, I want to welcome you. I think this is a very important class for me. I know it is emotionally, because we live in a time, as I mentioned, it is chaos. I don't think I'm going to go through everything because I don't want to make this a 4-hour tape, but we know that English learners have a lot on their plate in terms of stress, whether they're documented or undocumented, whether they're dreamers, whether their parents are okay, but they're not. I have situations I know of where one child in the family does not have dreamer status, but the parents are legally here okay, and the older son is here okay, but the middle son could be deported. I hope you don't need to ask why I would even bring this kind of stuff up, because if you teach students and the students have a huge issue, whether it's parents, they're going through a divorce, or parents going through drug addiction, or parents that have any kind of a number of problems or community problems or unemployment in the local area, it's going to impact English language learners. So this class, I call it an advocacy class. I want to talk about advocacy conceptually. I have not seen it really defined, but I guess the word is speaking up on behalf of someone else and teaching them also to speak up on their own behalf. And it is kind of risky, both for you, because there may be retribution against you, or that if you are a teacher or counselor and you advocate too strongly, you may irritate people on the school board or in the community, and people may not like you. And if you expect to do the right thing in life, don't expect to be rewarded for it. A lot of times the people that do the right thing are forgotten to history or squashed somehow. And so that's why it's tough when you have principals, and I mean principals with a PL, not PAL. When if you're a principal, for instance, if you do the right thing, you may not keep your job. That's just that simple. So, and then you've got to gauge how much you're willing to speak up. I mean, I can't know how much courage I have. Would I put my job on the line for stuff? I'd like to think I would, but it's easier when you're older and you're near retirement because you don't have as much to lose. Whereas if you're 25 years old and your family's established in a community, are you going to speak up if it might mean you have to leave, or you'd upset your spouse or some of your relatives or something? It's always tough. You got to decide what is the right thing to do and the ethical thing to do. and trust that you'll do it. But if anybody tells you all about it and how they did it and how it works, then usually I don't buy into that, because how much courage does any of us have when it comes down to the putting it all on the line? Everybody wants to be a hero, but you never know if doing heroic things are really going to be recognized. So that's kind of a mess there I left you. But so I want to welcome Bellarmino, and I know we got Spanish teachers all over the place. I'm trying to think. I think mainly ESL though. We got Bellarmino to our class, Guillermo, Spanish teacher, I think, and Sarah, April, again, Michaela, another Sarah Johnson, Maggie, Katie, me, I'm in the list, and I'm always here to learn too, Valeria and Michelle. So it's kind of a small class, but I'm glad we got plenty of people in it, because we had to have 5, but fact is I wanted to make it a little more interesting. I do want to have a small group discussion on Zoom. Oh man, I love those discussions, and I like talking to people one-on-one. Sometimes when we get 2 or 3 people together, it's just dynamic. It's kind of like your discussion page, only it's much faster. It's much more interesting and natural. It's kind of weird to have to write stuff down and wait a couple days and everybody else chimes in on it. So welcome to the class. First, I want to go over to the syllabus. I'm going to do this fairly quickly. I tried to cut this down so we can do this in really 26 days. We don't have much time. I've got the 2 books. Now, this is a little dry in parts, but it is an up-to-date book. And I got away from books I used last year because they're kind of old. And here's a nice book. It's a little bit aged, but a few years. But it's a short, quick book on American immigration. And we'll just read those. It's important for you to know about the past of immigration, documentation, citizenship, because a lot of people like to throw it in your face and they'll say, my ancestors did this or that. Well, you find out that only certain ancestors were allowed in the first place. Eastern Europeans, Asians, people from India, China, Japan, they had a heck of a time. Were often kicked out of the country after they welcomed in to work. Same thing with the Brazos program, where people from Mexico would come up and work during World War I, World War II. People would change the definition of, for instance, the definition of what is a white person was actually changed so that Hispanic people would be kicked out. They were designated white and then undesignated white. And I like history because it has the facts and we don't have to worry about people saying it's false news or fake news. It's the history. The fact we even talk about fake news is ridiculous. Okay, so what do I want to share with you? Well, the first thing we're going to have is our culture map, but it's a little different. It's not the one you did for 804. So that's the one thing I wanted to point. And I'll talk about the assignment here in a minute. So I'm just looking at the syllabus. We're going to do a little annotated website, but only 5 things so that you can write nice, rich stuff about 5 things. That'll be due. I put the due date on here, and I'll get to it in a minute, but 50 points. You got to do 5 of them. They're 10 points each. And then I did a resource notebook, which I'll explain a bit more later, but basically I talked about on page 6 of the syllabus. It's kind of basically almost like an address book, only you have this resource book and you open it up, it can be alphabetical, and you can keep adding to it. That's why I said I don't care if you actually get a kind of like an address book, but it has plenty of space in there so you can write a paragraph or 2, or you can just do it on sheets of paper. But the idea is to create your own little, like a phone book or a address book, you know. Rolodex are kind of out. I mean, you can do this on your computer, but it'd be like where you can go and say, oh, I need so-and-so to help me with immigration, or I got a student needs a translator, or I need a student needs to translate into Arabic. And where do you go for that? Who do you talk to? Who would you even call to even have a guess? And you might say, Dr. Tracy, I'll call him, but you're wrong because he doesn't know too much. He knows where to ask questions and that's about it. And I know that the state of Nebraska, and we're in Nebraska, but if you're in another state, fine, you can look up your resources there. I'd like to see those, actually. I'd like to see what they have to offer in different states. I know the states like California, Illinois, some eastern states, Texas, Massachusetts, they have much more developed resources than Nebraska. Okay, but anyhow, so I got this resource notebook and I got a whole page describing it. And then our last thing is 50 points, and that's an interview with me. You can interview me or I can interview you, and we can do this with 2 or 3 people, or we can do it one-on-one. I don't care. I may record these, I may not record these, depends on what you think, what you feel about it. I do want to say one thing, that all of you could be in sensitive situations where if you say something on a discussion board that criticizes your school, you want to make sure that you feel comfortable with that. And if you don't, you can always email me separately, or you can email other people in the class if you want, confide in them. Because I'm aware that this is sensitive stuff. If you were to say that another teacher in your school does not like Hispanics or does not like making accommodations, you don't want that to get back to them, because then they just get nasty with you. Even if people know that you don't care for the way they do things, it's better not to put it in print or statement. So we always want to look out for that. So if you have anything that you're worried about, just talk to me directly or other people that you feel comfortable with in the class. So don't put it on a discussion board if you say, oh, so-and-so over here is, I think you know that, but, I don't want to assume anything. Now, so that's the major assignments. I really cut these down so it could be very friendly for people taking a July class. That's why it's 5 things on the immigration, on the websites or resources, whatever that is. And then I'll have some videos, and I put some things in there on videos. I know some of these you've already seen, so I'll try to come up with new stuff. And I don't need to, or I may put it, I can put it up, and then you can, like 9500 Liberty, I've used that in 804. New Faces on Main Street, God Grew Tired of Us. And I've got other videos, but if you take an 826, you've probably already seen a lot of them. All right, so the first week's assignment. Oh, the issue of advocacy. I wanted to address that just briefly. Advocacy, I try to imagine a symbol like a triangle of advocacy, and not that any one direction is more important than another, but one aspect of advocacy is teaching well and getting good materials for your students, advocating for technology, writing grants, or finding someone at another school that can write a grant for 2 or 3 different schools. I know that grant writing is hard business, and frankly, you may be lucky enough that you've done it and been successful. I've tried it, but it's like writing a novel and then not knowing if anybody will even read it, much less pay for it or buy it, in other words. So I could write a grant and send it in and nothing happens, and I spent a massive amount of work. I think it'd be like me filing a lawsuit. I would hire a lawyer, a grant writer to do the work. So ESUs in Nebraska, your educational unit, is helpful in supporting schools. So always look to ESU 10s or 11s or 12s, whichever number you have in your city. And that's a good place to look for help with other things, plus money. Now, advocacy for materials is one thing, persuading the principal or the school board that you need more technology, making the case for it. I always greatly believe in sharing. Hey, I got something, but you can have a piece of the pie too. That always gets buy-in from people, all right, because they get a little jealous if only a certain group of students gets to use certain material. All right, books in the library is kind of similar. Books about your students' background, about their country, because part of your advocacy is to advocate to enlighten other people and show them the beauty of the culture of your English learner students and any diversity in your school for that matter. which, you know, diversity is not just ethnicity or linguistic. A lot of times it can be everything from sexual orientation to the work of the parents, to socioeconomic, could be philosophical. People are very philosophical. Usually it's religion. We normally say we don't talk about religion in school, but we all know it's there. And if something that people believe, which we know in culture is what you make, what you believe, and what you do for a living, those are the things you make. Those are the three aspects of culture. I think I got those right. Artifacts, belief systems, and what am I thinking? Artifacts, belief systems. They'll come to me in a minute. I'm getting old in the afternoon, but I'll remember it later when I wake up. So cultures to be shared. So advocacy is building a community of understanding. That's kind of what this class is about. It's not about, and I really wanted to get this across. Yes, I'm talking about laws. There are laws to protect English language learners. Now, here's the problem. When laws are violated, or you think they've been violated, you can file lawsuits, you can file complaints. You have to basically raise hell about it a lot of times. If you can't persuade people in other ways, you have to get really hardcore about it. The problem is in our society, there's always payback. There's always retribution. You can do the right thing, but don't expect to get the right results. You're always working in the mode of persuading people in by any means other than hitting them over the head with a legal club. So that's one way I look at advocacy. We can cite laws. You can go tell someone they're breaking the law. But we know people speed even though there are laws against speeding. And occasionally they get in trouble. But a lot of times they get away with it. And people may be biased or bigoted against a certain group, or they may not do the right thing by them. And sometimes you find yourself tolerating situations and trying to work around them. The fact is, I think 99% of the time we work around situations. We don't usually get people fired. We don't usually get legal judgments against them. We don't, we don't wage war with the school board. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but it means you must pick the battles because you're not the biggest fish in the ocean. So your bite may not frighten too many people. All right, so we think of advocacy as more the soft velvet persuasion rather than punching. So I just wanted to get that out because I think a lot of times people think you're going to make some speech like on a TV or a movie and everything's going to change after that because it's just a wonderful thing. It's not going to be like, what is that movie? An Officer and a Gentleman. No, that's not it. I'm thinking of the wrong one. The one, here I'll forget. But the one where Jack Nicholson is the evil colonel and they're in court and finally Tom Cruise confronts him. You know the movie I'm talking about. And he goes up, says something about you can't handle the truth. You've probably seen the movie. You rarely see that in court with some dramatics, and the guy confesses, yes, I did it, it's true, and he gets arrested and the evil guy gets in trouble. Most people never fall for that. So drama is not something I expect to see much. I expect to see a lot of patience and tolerance and persuading people, and the real art is in getting people to change, which is very hard to do. People think they get in a relationship and they'll make the other person change, and they find out, ooh, that's hard work. So you work with people that are difficult sometimes, but you do what you do for the sake of the kids and their families, and also all the kids in your school. That's enough rambling about that. That's all I wanted to say. As far as this week's assignment, I've given you that cultural map, and I'm asking you on the culture map to basically, in the discussion, I want you to talk about yourself, introduce yourself, and I want your map to be more of a culture map about either ELs or diversity in your community. Okay, so it shouldn't be about your history, but more the history and kind of how you fit into your community. And you can do that any way you want. I mean, it doesn't take artwork, and most of you have done this map before. If you haven't done a map, somebody can always ask, and I'll send you a sample of one of your maps to one of the other students. So I'm asking about introduce yourself, do a culture map of your community. And then you can write little things in there. What are some of the conflicts? It could be old conflicts or new conflicts. Like out in the western type of Nebraska, parts of Nebraska, used to be the cattle people against the farmers, you know. Maybe that was more in Billy the Kid's time. I thought it was kind of cool because when we talk about old, and my grandfather was born in 1873. And if he were alive now, he would be 145 years old, 46 years old. And so when he was born, Billy Kid was still around, but when he was born, Jesse James and his gang were still robbing banks in the area where he was born. He was 6 years old when Jesse James robbed the bank near Hannibal, Missouri. So that's a long ways back. So, you know, I was born, my grandfather I was a year old when he passed away, and he was 81. So he's take my age, which I'm a firm 39, and you can add on about 81 years and you get 160. Don't ask about the numbers. Okay. So I'd like you to just kind of give a background on your community. In first paragraph, talk about yourself. Second paragraph, talk about what you know about English language learners, you know, law or any of that stuff, or things you think are true but don't know, or situations you face and are conflicted about. But as I said, be judicious. Don't name names, and probably don't mention too much about who or what school or community. How do you see yourself as an advocate? Third paragraph, pretty important. What can you do for your English language learners? And maybe you haven't taught or worked with any of them yet, but what do you think you could do? Okay, so don't pass on the question if it doesn't exactly fit. And I would like you to respond to at least 5 of your classmates. And if you can, respond to all of them. Just say a little bit. You don't have to write large sentences or anything. A long sentence, a couple sentences would be fine. Now, I printed off I changed this video a little bit, but the assignment. The readings are in these two books. A little bit in the first, this book's pretty dry, this first little part in here. It's about territorial laws on language. And I want you to read this stuff. It's kind of important to know this because law has been used to suppress other languages and to suppress people, but particularly languages. People are afraid of language. The second thing is this really interesting little book on American immigration. And it's pretty historical, the first part of it. I think it goes up to 60s, but I chose this. It's fairly cheap. It's a small book, and you can read the whole thing in a week or two. I'm going to have you read it like a third a week for 3 weeks of the 4. So I just want you to get background because you have to gather some knowledge here. I didn't find a video for everything, but I have lots of videos, by the way. And then I put some websites on here for the first week. I would like you to take a look at these websites just to get an idea of what, if I can figure out where I put them. Here we go. Yes, I've got a little statement here about the 2 readings, about things you might gather from them. This video is going to be right here. And then on Monday, I'm going to post a video about the readings. The law one's not going to be too interesting, but you can read through it and then come up with a couple of background things. Then I got some websites. I just want you to look at them. Mostly the Nebraska Department of Education website, but I also have the NEA website, National Education Association. They have a website on diversity and cultural issues. And I got one on tolerance. Now, I'm not really going into the teaching ESL videos as much. more talking about situational issues. Now, my other class, I shared a video last week by Chandra Diaz, who, and if you're in that class, you already saw that video. I posted last week, and she's very much an advocate, particularly of all multicultural students, but especially dealing, her background being Hispanic. She knows so much about Hispanic cultural and movement and equity issues. And you're never going to find somebody who's an expert. You're going to find people that know about this and others know a lot about that. And you pick them up. And that's why I want you to think about this class as kind of a resource class. You should come out of this class with a fairly good understanding of where you can go to get assistance for teaching, but especially for helping your students in their community, English language learners, obviously, and also migrants. Migrants are people, I think I just mentioned, people work in forestry or raw agriculture, which is really cattle slaughter, beef, pork slaughter, chickens, working, on truck farms and harvesting or working on a farm. Raw products is the emphasis, and also fishing, but you don't really hear too much of that unless there's commercial fishing, like off of Houston. You may have groups that are Asian that do fishing for shrimp or something like that. I can't attest to that now. I know that was true many years ago, but it could have changed. Used to be Vietnamese refugees were really into fishing a lot because they had that background from Vietnam. And then again, we live in very chaotic times and very stressful times. I'll be very frank about my belief about certain laws and practices now, separating of families, which you will find affects your students. Previously on separation of families, I had videos and talks about things like the big Grand Island immigration raid back in the 2006, when they raided a major plant over there. I can't remember which one. I know it wasn't Tyson at the time, but parents weren't home. They were arrested and were gone. And kids go to school and they come home, there's nobody there. And guess what? The schools dealt with this because there was nobody else to deal with it. Same thing happened at O'Neill when there was a raid up there. A bunch of stuff was going on. I think in some cases the parents were released. Depends on who's conducting the raid and what the purpose of. I think that was more fraud. There's a lot of rumor and misinformation. I'm going to try to be as accurate as I can, or at least preface my comments saying I think this is the situation. But unfortunately, a lot of stuff is just not printed on the front page, and you don't know the whole story. A lot of papers like to print positive. I noticed in Nebraska, a lot of papers print all the positive stories. You know, somebody won at the county fair, so-and-so is going to college, and they're a minority student, how wonderful. But they may not have what happens to families when someone's deported. And depending on the community and the paper, they don't like controversy. I can attest to that. A lot of papers basically want to just have positive things and everything's great in Nebraska, you know. It's not the New York Times, which is not a failing newspaper, by the way, just in case you thought it was. All right, well, that's what I got to say about this, and I hope I've not been too boring, and I look forward to having you all in the class, and I want to say goodbye to you all again. I will put on a video tomorrow talking about the readings. Won't be earth-shattering. As you know, I got some really good videos. They're pretty heartbreaking, but I'm always looking for more. And some of you suggested some. I'm gonna see. I have to try to come up with some money to buy more stuff, but I can't search around on the net. So if anybody knows any really good immigration stories on the internet, or movies you've watched that people could get on Netflix or something, I would appreciate it. Things that are relevant to advocacy for diversity, but in particular, obviously associated with language learners and you as teachers in the schools or counselors or hopefully future administrators, because that's where it's going to really start to change. Thank you very much.